Hey everyone, welcome back to another Will's Engineering Tips. This is part 2 of the SolidWorks tutorial that I am doing for everybody. So in the last video we just talked about basic sketches, some constraints, and then just an overview of SolidWorks, and so today we're just going to be continuing on that. I'm going to talk about some features and other various little things. Sorry if the last video was a little bit basic. I kind of realized afterwards that if somebody's watching this video, maybe they're not as beginner as I would expect. So I'm going to go ahead and maybe skip over some things that I might mention, and if there's anything, any questions or anything like that, I can answer later. So I'm going to just go ahead and create a new part here. And I'm just going to go ahead like I always do, get my settings, document properties, units, make sure those are in inches, and I typically like just show fractions in 30 seconds just because typically, where I work as a manufacturing designer, all the fabricators, welders, assemblers, we all use, fractional inches. We're not using decimal points, so, I'm not going to tell them a 0.125 hole. I'm just going to say an 1/8 inch hole. It's just easier like that, so I typically just like to use fractions. That way I can just see everything as well. As a designer, though, we get used to using decimals, so either way it'll work out. You can change it if you go to make a blueprint later, so that doesn't matter too much. That's just my preference. I'm going to go ahead and select a material here. Today I'm going to be doing aluminum. We're just going to do some 6061 alloy. Apply, close that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start out making a sketch. Talked about this in the last. I'm going to make this on the front plane. So there I just clicked sketch, clicked on the front plane, and now I'm going to start out with a center rectangle. So if you go to the rectangles tab, click down, we have here a center rectangle, and what this allows us to do is make a square or a rectangle, doesn't matter, around a center point. So if you see I clicked on the origin there and then I drag outward and it creates a square that's centered around that point. So I'm just going to go ahead and click to place it, plus escape, and I want to make a square, so I'm going to go ahead and select this line, hold control, select another line, use my mouse and click make equal. So now those are the same. I can go ahead and put a dimension. We're going to go ahead and make this 3 inches. So now I have a 3 by 3 square perfectly centered around my origin point here. So now something else I wanted to talk about, one of the sketch features, is a fillet. And so a fillet rounds, well, like SolidWorks pretty much gives you a helpful tip, but it rounds the corner, creating a tangent arc. So for example, if I wanted to make a corner here, I could draw a circle and make it tangent to these two edges, or I can just go ahead and click on this fillet tool up here, and I can either select a corner, or I can select 2 lines that I want it to make a tangent arc between. So I'm just going to go ahead and select the corners here. It's going to give us an error talking about the equidistant relationship. We're just going to go ahead and continue through that. And keep going. Make sure this is on headphones. And there we are. So now that those are set, I can go ahead and over here on the left, I can select my fillet parameters. So for that, I'm going to make a 1/4 inch, so 0.25 fillet, and that makes a 1/4 inch radius arc. So I'm going to go ahead and check. And so now you can see that we have those fillets there, puts in a dimension down here. It's all black, so we are fully defined, nothing can change. I'm just going to go ahead and click check to get out of this. And so now I'm going to move into something called the Features tab. So after you make a sketch, now we're into talking about, how do I make something 3D? How do I make this something that I can later make, right? Because obviously this is just like a print on a piece of paper, so it's not really much we can do with it. So if we click over here on the Features tab, you can remain in the sketch or out of the sketch, it doesn't matter. So if I go ahead and exit the sketch, I can still access my Features tab, but if I want to re-enter the sketch, I can either double click on a sketch, or I can go here to my feature tree like I mentioned, right click on sketch 1, and then this button right here indicates edit sketch. So now I'm in the sketch, I can be in it, out of it, doesn't matter. If you click on the X here, that'll just discard any changes that you made in the sketch. So and it'll say discard changes to the sketch. Well, I didn't make any changes, so I can just go ahead and exit, and it'll just exit the sketch. But I want to be in the sketch for this, doesn't really matter, like I mentioned. Go here to features, and we're going to use what's called the Extruded Boss and Base. And this, and SolidWorks actually in 2020, they've given these little helpful views you can see, like basically what that feature or what that item will do. So we're going to go ahead and click on it there, and as you can see it rotated it, and now this yellow boundary area is essentially what we're extruding. So SolidWorks is smart enough to automatically know that we want to extrude out the inside area of this 3 by 3 with the filleted corner square. And so we have some things here. So it's going to go from the sketch plane. I can make it do from a surface, vertex, offset. We're not going to mess with that. Typically you just leave this on default. and then we can specify a direction. So I want this to either go in one direction, I can make it go the other way, doesn't really matter. And for this, so blind is essentially just one direction, so it's coming out this way. I can drag this arrow that it shows here, and I can drag it out, as far as I want. I can go back the other way, and you'll notice that this little button here changes the direction. So say it's coming out 2.06 inches in this direction. If I click this button, it'll reverse it. And so that's what blind is. But say I wanted it to go half and half, so I wanted a little bit on this side and a little bit on that side. Well, for that, if I go ahead and down click this option here, there's an option called mid plane. And what that does is it extrudes it around this mid area, and it assumes that this is a plane that cuts through the middle of your part, and it extrudes equally in both directions. So whatever length this is the total length of it, but it's split in half on the left and on the right, or on the front and on the back, depending on how you're looking at it. So let's say that I want this to be, a 2-inch tall box. Well, for the sake of this video, let's go 1 inch. So that means that there's half an inch on this side of the sketch and half an inch on that side for 1 inch total. This doesn't mean 2 inches. Mid-plane means that your total length is based on the center of this. And I'm choosing that as mid-plane, which means that my origin is going to be exactly in the center of this square, which is something that can be helpful depending on other features that you might want to put in. After we go ahead and select that, I changed my dimension here. We're not going to mess with any of these options. I'll talk about that in a future video about doing fancy or more advanced features. We'll go ahead and click check, and SolidWorks turns this into a physical model. Again, if I hold the middle mouse button, I can rotate this, and you can see that there's a physical model. In the previous video, I talked about one of the settings that I had called tangential edges, or tangent edges turned off. And what that basically does is, as you'll notice, the part looks smooth, but yet when I hover my mouse over it, there's a face, a curved radius, and then another face. And you can see that they're separated by these lines here. And so what that setting does is it basically hides those lines so that the part looks smooth. Because obviously, in real life, if I were to make this part, I'm not going to have these little lines there necessarily. And so I typically turn that off. You can still access it, so if I click on that line, I can still click on it. It's still there, but it just hides it from view, so it's not like a black line as you see these edges. That's just a personal preference. You can turn it off, leave it on. It's all good. So then from here, we can now sketch other things on this part. We can start, making it different shapes. We can start cutting things. And so next we're going to do one of those. So I'm going to go ahead and click sketch again. I'm going to create another sketch. But this time, instead of using it from this bar, I'm going to show you a different way you can create a sketch. So let's say that I wanted to create a sketch on this face now. I'm just going to right click, and then right here you can see sketch. So then I can click sketch, and now I'm making a sketch on that face. And again, if I want to look at it normal to, I can just click the view orientation box. This little symbol, normal to, will place me normal to that. I can also get that from the space bar, also right there, normal to. It typically flips it around the backside. I'm not sure why it does that, but either way, you're facing normal to the plane, and no matter where I sketch, it'll sketch on this face. So for example, say, I want to place a circle, and I click way over here. Well, if I rotate it, you can see that it's actually still on that face, and it acts as if this face is a whole plane that stretches off into infinity. So whatever I sketch is only going to be on that plane of that face. So it doesn't matter where I put it. I can always specify where I want this later. I can just drag, drop it on the center there, and you can see that SolidWorks went ahead and made that a coincident relationship. So it basically took the center of this circle and merged it with that midpoint. That way it can't be changed. So if I try to drag this now, it's fixed, can't be moved. Another thing that I forgot to mention was you can actually delete constraints. So say you put that on there and then I realize, oh wait, I don't want that circle to be, locked up onto the origin. I want to be able to move it. I can just go ahead and click the little green and then press delete. And it'll just delete it, and then now I'm free to move it wherever I want. And so let's say I just wanted to put that back without dragging. I can just click on the midpoint, hold control. Typically, midpoint. Okay, that's weird. It's not letting me. Typically, it lets you select the origin. I don't know why it didn't do that there. But either way, we just dragged, dropped, made it coincident. Again, with smart dimensioning, I can either click on the circle and set my radius there, or I can go ahead and click smart dimension, which I typically prefer to use because it makes an actual dimension that can't be changed later. And I'm just going to go ahead and set that to, let's say we'll do an inch. So that's an inch diameter. I can change that as well if I go to liters. it's on the Dimension tab. I can go to Liters, and I can click this down here, which will turn it into a radius. And so it shows me a radius of a half. I typically just use diametral dimensions just because it's typically a little bit more common. You know, when you drill a hole, you're not drilling a half-inch radius, you're drilling an inch diameter. So it's just a little bit easier for me to see as a designer. And then from there, I'll show you another basic feature. Again, I'm not exiting Sketch, but for this case, since I exited the Sketch, or since I was in the Sketch in the last one, this case I'll exit the Sketch to show you that it can be done. I'll go to the Features tab, and this time, over here, at the top, I'm going to select Extruded Cut. And what this is going to do is essentially the same thing as an Extruded Boss, except it's going to cut the material rather than create material. So you'll notice that I'm not in a sketch, so it says I need to select a plane, a face, or an edge, or an existing sketch to use for this feature. So I'm just going to go ahead and select my circle, and as you'll see, that yellow area is what it wants to cut. And so basically it's going to cut that all the way out. Again, same conditions. There's blind, but with cut there's some other conditions that we can select. Through all, as the name implies, is going to cut through everything. Any material or face or 3D piece will go all the way through. Through all both means through all in both directions. So it's kind of like mid-plane but opposite. There's up to next, which basically means that this will cut up to the next face or surface that it encounters. This can be very helpful if you just want to go up to a certain point, but you don't want to go all the way through. You can do up to surface, and then I can specify, you know, I want that cut to go up to this surface, and I click on it. In this case, it would be a little bit redundant to do that. I can just use a through all, and it'll just cut all the way through the material. But we're going to go ahead and select blind, and we want it to cut only halfway into the part, so we're going to do 1/2 inch. So now this is going to cut from this face inward 1/2 inch. I can flip the side. That's not going to do anything though. If I do that, it's going to end up cutting around the circle and not the circle itself. We want to cut the circle itself, and so we're going to go ahead and click check. And as you'll see, SolidWorks cut our perfect hole right in the center, 1/2 inch through the piece, which leaves us another half from here to there. So those are some of the basic features that we might encounter in SolidWorks. That's the Extruded Boss and the Extruded Cut. Feel free to play around with that a little bit more. I also was able to show the Fillet tool. I can go ahead and show just a quick feature of how the Fillet tool works under the Features tab and not in a sketch, because we can create what's called a fillet or a chamfer even, which is an angled cut out rather than a rounded corner on pieces. So let's say I wanted to round over this edge right here. I can go ahead and click Fillet, and from here there's a couple options of fillet. Full round, I typically just use constant size fillet, it's one of the most common, and then you can just go ahead and click edges. So if I click this edge here, you'll notice that it rounds over that edge, and I like to, if you don't see this little yellow box on the left over here, it'll typically be on no preview. Just go ahead and click full preview, and then it'll show you kind of what it looks like. And if it doesn't appear, it means that your radius is too large. So sometimes if I put like too big of a radius, so let's go say 1.5, or I don't know how big I have to go, 10 let's say, you'll notice that it won't appear, and that's because it doesn't have enough material to effectively do a radius that'll fit. So I'm just going to go ahead and change that to, like, let's say 1/4 inch radius is kind of big, maybe we'll go a 1/16 just to round that over. And so that essentially shows a rounded over edge. I'm not going to mess with any other things, but if you want to select multiple radii, or you want to create multiple fillets all the same radius, you can just select multiple edges. So I want that edge at 1/16, and let's say I want this whole section, top and bottom, so I'll just go ahead and select this line as well, and now this will fillet this around this whole perimeter plus this hole, and we'll just go ahead and select that inside hole as well, which, as you can see, adds a little bit of material to create this type of, it's kind of hard to show, but this little curve on the inside. And so everything's filleted. We can just go ahead and click the checkbox, and there we go. It's a little bit weird, like I said, I don't have those lines shown, so everything looks super smooth and like you can't tell, but they're there and they can be selected inside, outside, and then the curve, of course. And then you'll notice over here in the feature tree that it went ahead and added a fillet. If you want to edit the feature tree, I can just right click on this and click edit feature. Say I want to, decrease that, increase that, or say I want to delete it, I can just select it, press delete, it's going to ask me if I want to. I select yes, and now it's gone. Same thing goes for a chamfer. I can go to insert and chamfer. Let's say I want to chamfer that edge right there. Actually, not that edge. Can I do a chamfer right here? Yep, the inside edge. We're going to make a chamfer. Say we want to, allow for a countersink. There is a different way that's a little bit better, in my opinion, to do that. But let's say this was a little hole, and there was going to be like a countersunk head for a screw. I don't know. So I can go ahead and select some of my parameters. So again, we'll do a 16th, and so that 16th is a square dimension length. And I can also change the angle. So let's say I want a 60-degree chamfer. So it's a little bit of like a harsher angle chamfer. Typically 60, 45 I think are common. And then the distance, this dimension here, 1/16, would be the length of it. And so that's the length of your chamfer by the angle of your chamfer. So then I'm going to put this back to 45, just keep it even, add a 16th, go ahead and click check, and then you can see there that it gave us a tiny little chamfer around that area. So I think that is all for this simple video, just about some of the most basic ways to make a part or sketch 3D. Feel free to play around with this. Feel free to ask any questions. You can try out some of the other things. I will be making videos about, revolved, swept, loft, what those mean, how to utilize them, as well as, how to make some real parts. Obviously, maybe there's a use for this, but as far as this goes, it's kind of just to show some of those features. So in other future videos, I'll be showing tutorials, but actually, how can I create something that can later be 3D printed or machined and things like that. I hope this video has been helpful. Feel free to comment, like, subscribe. Let me know any improvements, questions that you may have. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.